So how do you get 57 countries to agree on anything? Well, it turns out one diplomatic move from Israel managed to do just that, and it sparked this huge, unified condemnation that threw a pretty little-known region, Somaliland, right into the middle of a global firestorm.
And that really is the big question here, right? Why this massive, unified backlash? I mean, it's not just about one country recognizing another. The answer? Well, it's a mix of international law, decades of a frozen conflict in the Horn of Africa, and how this one move was seen as a potential threat to, believe it or not, the entire global order.
Okay, to really get why the reaction was so fast, you've got to look at what started it all. And man, things escalated quickly. For more than 30 years, Somaliland's independence was basically a non-starter. Nobody was touching it. Then, boom. Late 2025, Israel makes its move. And just 2 weeks later, the entire Islamic world responds, together.
All right, let's start at the beginning. The inciting incident, Israel's recognition of Somaliland, a place with a, let's just say, a very unique and contested status in the Horn of Africa.
You know, this slide really gets to the heart of the paradox that is Somaliland. Think about it. On one hand, it has all the stuff a country has, right? Its own government, its own money, its own army, and it's been like that for decades. But then, on the other hand, to pretty much the rest of the world, and especially to Somalia, it's just seen as a breakaway region, like a puzzle piece that's missing from their territory.
So you can imagine when Israel became the first and only UN member to actually formally recognize Somaliland. Wow, it didn't just break some unspoken rule, it completely shattered a decades-long international agreement. This wasn't just a polite diplomatic note. No, this was an earthquake. And the aftershocks? They came from the Muslim world, and they were immediate.
So how exactly did the world react? Well, Somalia didn't go it alone. It was smart. It went straight to its allies and asked for an emergency meeting of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the OIC. And we're talking about a seriously powerful group here, representing 57 different countries.
Right off the bat, the IOC Secretary General set a really severe tone, and you got to pay attention to the words he used here. Dangerous precedent, flagrant violation. He wasn't framing this as just some political disagreement. Nope, he called it a direct attack on international law and a threat to the stability of what is already a really volatile region.
And get this wasn't just some regular get-together. It was the 22nd extraordinary session. That word extraordinary is everything. It means this was an emergency summit. They were called together for one single reason, to come up with a unified Islamic response to what Israel just did.
And they didn't just put out a press release either. They passed a formal, binding resolution. This thing basically declared Israel's decision null and void, like it never happened. They called it illegal, they said Somaliland is part of Somalia, period, and they warned everyone against putting any foreign military there without Somalia's permission. It was a total, complete rejection, both legally and politically.
Now, this whole response wasn't just about politics. It was built on a core principle of international relations, something that really the entire global system of countries relies on. And this is the legal heart of their argument right here. What they're saying is, by recognizing a breakaway region, Israel violated Somalia's fundamental right to its own territory, its own borders that everyone else recognizes. I mean, that's a principle every country depends on to exist.
So, you see, the OIC framed this whole thing as a legal case, not just a political spat. It's like they put Israel's move on one side of the scale, and on the other, they piled on the weight of the UN Charter, their own OIC Charter, and this bedrock principle of not messing in other countries' business. For them, the scale tipped pretty clearly. But, and this is where it gets really interesting, the OIC's response wasn't just about protecting Somalia's borders. The actual text of their resolution connected what happened in Africa to the absolute core of the OIC's political agenda.
I mean, look at this. This was not an accident. They referred to Israel as the occupying power 17 times. That's a phrase that's directly tied to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It tells you everything. The OIC was sending a clear signal. We see everything Israel does, no matter where in the world it is, through this one specific lens.
The resolution itself connects the dots for you. It starts by condemning the Somaliland move, and then, in the next breath, it pivots to warning about Israeli policies towards the Palestinians. You can almost hear the underlying fear, right? They're thinking, hey, if Israel can just redraw borders in Africa on its own, what's to stop it from feeling like it can do the same in the Middle East?
And they didn't even stop there. This part is so crucial. Remember, this whole meeting was called to talk about Somalia. But in that same meeting, they passed a second, completely separate resolution just on the Palestinian cause. That tells you that for these 57 countries, these two issues, Somali sovereignty and Palestinian statehood, aren't just running side by side. They are deeply, deeply connected.
So, passing a resolution on Palestine in a meeting that was supposed to be about Somalia, that sent a message you just can't miss. It's that any move Israel makes, anywhere on the planet, is going to be seen by the OIC through the lens of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. To them, it's all part of the same story.
So, what does all this mean? After this whole diplomatic firestorm, what are the big takeaways? Why should we even care?
Well, first, this is way more than just a diplomatic disagreement. The OIC is warning that this could throw the entire Horn of Africa and the Red Sea into chaos. And let's be clear, we're talking about one of the most vital shipping lanes in the world. Any trouble there has immediate, real-world consequences for global trade and security.
Second, this is really about defending the international rules of the road. The OIC's condemnation is basically them planting a flag for the idea that one country can't just decide to redraw another country's borders. It's a stand for international law over just doing whatever you want, a principle that, frankly, every nation, big or small, needs to feel secure.
And third, this was just a huge show of diplomatic muscle. It proved that when it comes to certain key issues, especially anything involving Israel, the 57 nations of the Muslim world can and will act as one massive, powerful bloc. A bloc that's capable of isolating even the big players on the world stage. And that, of course, leaves us with the big, unanswered question. The OIC has drawn a crystal-clear line in the sand, and they have the combined weight of 57 countries behind them. But in a world that's ultimately driven by competing interests, can a diplomatic condemnation, no matter how unified it is, actually change the facts on the ground? I guess we'll have to wait and see.